They called me the family failure, the dreamer, the one who just couldn't get it together. For 15 years, I stayed silent, driving the same beat-up car, showing up to family dinners with a quiet smile while they celebrated everyone else. But what they didn't know was that behind the scenes, I was building a billion-dollar empire. And today, when they step onto my private jet and realize whose name is on the side, everything is about to change. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been counted out, stay with me. Because sometimes the quiet ones aren't failing. They're just busy creating something the world can't ignore. Hit that subscribe button, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. The first no I remember didn't come from a stranger. It came from my own father, sitting across the dinner table, his fork paused midair. "I just don't see the point," he said, voice heavy with disappointment. "You're wasting your education chasing something nobody cares about." I was 22, fresh out of college, heart pounding with ideas bigger than my resume. I'd spent nights coding, designing, dreaming. I didn't want to take the safe job offer at the bank or follow the traditional path my family had laid out for me. I wanted to build something of my own. But in my family, dreams weren't enough. Stability was currency. Status was safety. Risk was foolish. Each rejection after that felt like a quiet door closing. Friends choosing safer careers. Relatives asking at every holiday dinner if I had found a real job yet. Even the people who loved me the most couldn't see the vision I was carrying. It hurt, of course it did. But looking back now, it was the best kind of hurt, the kind that hardens into something unbreakable. Because early rejection didn't destroy me. It trained me to build without applause. To trust my instincts even when no one else understood. And slowly, silently, it planted a fire in me. A fire that no amount of disapproval could put out. Little did they know, every no was simply preparing me for a much bigger yes. And that moment? It was closer than anyone could have imagined. While the world thought I was lost, drifting, wasting time, I was quietly building an empire no one could see. My first office wasn't a gleaming high-rise or a trendy co-working space. It was a tiny corner of a studio apartment, squeezed between a broken futon and a second-hand desk. The walls were thin, the Wi-Fi was spotty, and some nights, the only light was from my cracked laptop screen. But none of that mattered. Every late night of coding, every failed prototype, every rejected pitch, they were bricks. Invisible, maybe. But stacking higher every day. I said no to vacations. No to shiny distractions. No to anything that would pull me away from the vision that only I could see. And while the family gossip circles whispered about how Leah still hadn't figured it out, I quietly crossed my first $1 million in revenue. Not with fanfare. Not with flashy headlines. Just grit. Focus. And relentless belief. It's funny, isn't it? How people measure success by what they can see, the car, the house, the title on a business card. But real success? It grows underground first, where no one claps, no one notices, and no one believes. The roots always come before the flowers. I wasn't just building a company. I was building resilience. Building independence. Building a life that didn't need permission to bloom. And as the foundation got stronger, so did I, readying myself for the day when the truth would no longer fit in the shadows. I always thought staying quiet was the noble choice. That if I worked hard enough, stayed humble enough, they'd eventually see. They'd realize I wasn't lost, I was simply building something bigger than they could understand. But life has a funny way of forcing your hand. It wasn't a betrayal or a scandal that broke me. It was a text message. Simple. Casual. A family group chat buzzing about Tessa's new beach house, Chris's latest promotion, Dad's retirement party. And then a photo. Tessa clinking champagne glasses, captioned. To the real success stories of the family. No malice, maybe. Just the casual cruelty of people who had already written my story for me and left no room for a different ending. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something shift deep inside. A quiet click, like a lock sliding open. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. They would never see me, not unless I showed them. And not with words, not with explanations, not with desperate hope that they'd someday understand. No. The only language they respected was results. It was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my place at the table, or better yet, building my own table, one they couldn't ignore. That night, I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote in bold ink, "No more hiding." Because sometimes, silence stops being strength. Sometimes, the real strength is stepping into the light and letting the world adjust to your brilliance. After that night, everything changed, but on the surface, nothing did. I still showed up at family gatherings in my old Civic. Still wore the same faded jeans and comfortable sneakers. Still let them believe the story they'd written for me, the sweet, lost dreamer who never quite figured it out. But behind the scenes, I was moving like a storm nobody saw coming. Every deal I closed, I did it quietly. Every new investment, every partnership, tucked neatly behind layers of LLCs and trusts. I built a team of geniuses, coders, designers, marketers, who believed in the future we were creating, even when the world didn't yet understand it. The first time one of my projects crossed $10 million in revenue, I celebrated with takeout Thai food at my kitchen table, alone. No flashy Instagram post. No press releases. Just a quiet toast to the invisible victories. Because I wasn't building for applause. I was building for impact. And because I knew, the longer I stayed silent, the more powerful the reveal would be. It wasn't deception. It was discipline. Every time someone patted my hand at Thanksgiving and said, "You'll figure it out someday, Leah," I smiled and nodded, knowing I had already figured it out. It takes strength to rise. It takes even more strength to rise silently. And when the moment finally came to step into the light, I wanted it to be undeniable. Not a lucky break. Not a fluke. But the result of 15 years of faith, focus, and fire no one ever bothered to look for. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I had carefully planned to stay under the radar, quietly building, quietly winning. But success has a way of leaking through the cracks, no matter how hard you try to contain it. The first ripple started with a tech blog. An article about an anonymous investor reshaping the future of immersive art platforms. Buried in the credits, someone noticed a tiny connection, my LLC, listed in a funding disclosure. By the time the whispers made it to a bigger outlet, the secret was out. Forbes called the next morning. A feature. A photo shoot. A title I had only ever joked about in my own mind. Leah Thompson, the hidden billionaire shaping the next era of virtual art. And just like that, the story I had kept so carefully hidden was ready to explode. My phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, investors, brands wanting partnerships. And, of course, my family. First it was Tessa. "OMG Leah, why didn't you tell me?" Then Chris. "Hey, saw something crazy about you. Is it true?" Finally, my father's short, clipped message. "We need to talk." 15 years of invisibility evaporated overnight. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the headline. And as the family reunion crept closer, the one they'd all assumed would be just another round of "What is Leah doing with her life?" I realized. The stage was set. Not for revenge, but for revelation. The private jet touched down under a flawless blue sky. The engines purred to a halt as a line of black cars waited at the runway, shimmering under the Arizona sun. One by one, they stepped off. My father. My mother, clutching her designer handbag. Tessa, checking her reflection in her phone. Chris, trying, and failing, to hide his nerves. They thought they were walking into another polished, polite gathering, another chance to gently pity Leah for still figuring things out. Instead, they walked straight into my world. The Rolls-Royces whisked them to my island resort, sleek architecture blending into endless white beaches. Everywhere they looked, there were reminders. Digital billboards showcasing my work. Exhibits of my highest-selling collections. Headlines from Forbes, Bloomberg, and Wall Street Journal cycling across screens. Their silence was louder than any words. At dinner that evening, they sat around a massive glass table overlooking the ocean. The air was thick with unspoken questions. I stood at the head of the table. Calm. Grounded. Finally, seen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply told my story, the one they had never asked to hear. How every failure they imagined was a carefully chosen silence. How every slight they dismissed only sharpened my focus. And then, I told them the truth. I didn't build this to prove you wrong. I built it because I believed in a future you couldn't see yet. And now, you're standing in it. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the ocean answered, crashing softly against the shore. At first, they tried to recover. Small compliments. Awkward laughter. My father attempted a toast, voice rough around the edges. Tessa blurted out how she always knew I had potential. Chris mumbled something about misunderstandings. But the truth hung heavy between us, undeniable. It wasn't just about the billions. It was about how little they had seen me, really seen me, all these years. It was about how easy it had been to believe the worst instead of asking deeper questions. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't list every missed opportunity, every careless comment. Instead, I simply showed them what grace looks like when you finally hold the power. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. For the first time in my life, there was no lecture in his voice, no disappointed sigh. Just a quiet, trembling honesty. I was wrong. I thought I knew better. But you built something beyond anything I ever imagined. I smiled. Not out of victory, but out of peace. I didn't need you to believe in me back then, I said gently. But maybe we can start again, now. His eyes glistened under the moonlight, and for a moment, the years between us softened. Not every story gets a perfect ending. But sometimes, the biggest triumph isn't just success. It's being seen, fully, finally, and without conditions. The days that followed the reunion felt different. Lighter, somehow. Not because everything was magically fixed, it wasn't. But because the burden of needing their approval had finally lifted. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. But I also wasn't the little girl chasing applause at the dinner table. I had built something lasting. Something real. And whether they understood it fully or not didn't change its worth. Chris emailed me a week later, not asking for favors, but offering sincere congratulations. Tessa sent photos of her new startup idea, asking for advice, not money. Even my father sent me a handwritten letter, short, imperfect, but genuine, acknowledging the strength it took to follow my own path. For the first time, family felt different. Not a competition. Not a hierarchy. Just people, flawed, trying, sometimes learning a little too late. I realized something powerful. Success isn't about making others eat their words. It's about reaching a place where their words no longer define you. And family? Sometimes family grows alongside you. Sometimes it doesn't. Either way, your story, your success, remains valid. The black sheep. The hidden billionaire. The dreamer who dared to believe. I wasn't who they thought I was. I was who I always knew I could be. Months later, as I stood overlooking the coastline from my island, I thought about the path that brought me here. Not just the late nights and silent sacrifices, but the choice to believe in something no one else could see. I didn't just build a company. I built a space. A space where the underestimated could create without needing permission. A space where being different wasn't a weakness, it was the advantage. My team? Filled with the quiet ones. The ones passed over, doubted, overlooked, just like I once was. And together, we were changing industries, redefining what success looked like. It wasn't about flashing wealth. It wasn't about titles or proving anyone wrong. It was about building something bigger than me. A legacy rooted in resilience. In quiet strength. In the fierce, stubborn belief that dreams, even fragile ones, are worth fighting for. As the sun dipped behind the ocean, painting the sky in fire and gold, I made myself a promise. No more shrinking to fit old expectations. No more apologizing for growing bigger than the box I was given. Because when you build your own table, you don't need to beg for a seat. You invite others, the dreamers, the builders, the quiet warriors, to sit beside you. And together, you make room for a new kind of future. A future where being underestimated is just the beginning. Not the end. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest legacy of all. After everything, what I realized is simple: your value isn't determined by who doubts you, it's shaped by who you decide to become when no one is watching. Building quietly isn't weakness, it's power growing in silence. If this story resonates with you, remember, you don't have to scream to be seen. Sometimes, the loudest statement is the life you create against all odds. I believe that when you choose yourself, even when no one else does, you're already winning. And someday, those who underestimated you will see what you were building all along. If this story inspired you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share your journey below. I read every word, and this community was built for voices like yours. Let's keep growing quietly, and let the results speak loudly. Your next chapter is just beginning.